I apologize. The video quality is going to be really bad because I'm like on the stairs to my basement. I did say I was going to post something. Honestly, I really don't feel like it. And the ironic part is I don't feel like it because of the topic that I'm addressing, which is mental illness. I really just don't feel like posting or really doing anything. I just kind of want to go to sleep, just because that's really like the only escape it feels sometimes to get away from the raging panic. And mind you, this is the hardest thing to explain to people, especially people who have never experienced it, is the fact that I'm not panicking in my head. It's actually a bodily response. It's like my body's constantly running a marathon and my heartbeat is always going, but there's no thoughts up here that are making me anxious. So it's hard to explain that to people. But anyway, we were going to kind of discuss how mental illness and Christianity can coincide. Now, I grew up, both my parents have mental illness. And when I was very, very, very little, and some of you, if you're watching this and you've known me since we went to school together or we grew up together or whatever, there were times probably between the ages of like 7, 8, somewhere around in there, 9. It was, we'll say, I must have been in 4th or 5th grade, 3rd or 4th grade actually. And that's when I had my first dose of obsessive compulsive disorder. And I didn't know what it was. I had no idea, and nobody around me knew what it was. It started out, interestingly, I would repeat things like over in my head over and over again. But of course, when you're little and no one's around to help you, you don't know what's going on. But that's where it started. I started repeating things over and over and over again in my head to make me feel better, which is very, it's very, that's what Puro is, and that's how it started, and I would obsessively ask for reassurance about things, and then like another part of OCD is something called like magical thinking, where it's like, if this happens, then this is going to happen, which if you have OCD, you understand. If you don't, then you're probably just like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And to be honest with you, a lot of times, like, I deal with it. It doesn't make any sense at all. So it started when I was really, really, really young. And I told my dad I didn't tell anyone else about it because something in me knew that the other kids weren't dealing with what I was dealing with. And it started out with, like, intrusive thoughts. And intrusive thoughts are thoughts that you can't turn off. Like okay, so someone... This is a comparison to a normal person versus someone with OCD. So an intrusive thought is like, what would happen if I jumped off this cliff? A normal person would just dismiss that thought, but a person with OCD continually thinks it until it drives them absolutely insane. And you can also have intrusive thoughts about doing horrible things to others, children, your parents, animals, anything, but you don't want to do them, so it causes you a great deal of anxiety and stress. So there was, for a couple of years of my life, there was a point where I was like not eating, not sleeping, as a kid. And, I was told that God was testing me. And, I don't think my dad knew what to do with that. Like, he didn't know what was going on with me, that it was something that was passed down to me. Fun part is, though, is I actually, took a DNA test, and it already said that I have obsessive compulsive disorder, or that I have the genes for it, or I'm more likely to get it. And turns out I'm diagnosed with it, so that's fun. Actually, I'm predisposed genetically to a lot of different mental illness, and it all is all diagnosed. But now that I'm older. By the way, like, when I say that he said, like, God was testing me, I think that really messed with me because I thought that God was causing it. But the thing is God doesn't cause things like that. He wouldn't torment a child that way. I don't think at that age when they didn't know what was going on. He allowed it, though. And sometimes I get upset because I don't know why. I feel like my life would have been a lot different had it been addressed as a kid. Now that I'm an adult, it's different. And actually, I found out that I had OCD because when I turned 18 and graduated high school, and if you didn't know this, big changes, especially with a person with obsessive compulsive disorder, it can trigger it. So I went like, oh my God, so many years of my life, like without it. And all of a sudden, like it resurfaced. And the only thing I could think is, I remember this. Like the moral obsessions and like the intrusive thoughts and like all of that. And it was just as bad. And like there were points where I was like just writhing around on the ground, crying, begging God to just kill me. And it was that bad. And like I said, the only thought I could think was, I remember this. And I started to research it because I had no answers. Nobody had any answers for me. The doctor certainly didn't know. Also, I wasn't sleeping like at all. Like I would go, God, like 2 weeks with no sleep. Like, and the most depressing part about it is that every day I looked in the mirror without sleep, is I could see the darkness around my eyes getting darker and darker and darker, and my eyes getting more bloodshot and more bloodshot and more bloodshot. And so that's kind of how that went. And at the time, and OCD has a tendency to do this, especially if you grew up in a religious atmosphere, it'll cling to anything. So my immediate assumption was, God is punishing me for something. And like I said, it clings to things like your faith, everything. God is punishing me. So that's part of the reason why I ran away from God for a really, really long time, is because I was just like, why would I worship a God that's going to put me through so much pain, when really I didn't realize like he wasn't causing it. Like I was just born with this. He just allowed it. And I still haven't figured out why yet. And it still bothers me because it sometimes it's crippling, it's debilitating. Like there are a lot of people I want to hang out with that I don't have it in me to do. Like when I first started filming this video, like I was smoking a cigarette down here, and I was like, I might as well just do it now because I don't feel like, I really don't feel like filming and like setting it all up and everything like that. But at this age now, what I deal with is really, really bad depression and really, really bad panic. And it's for no reason. Like, it's hard to explain to someone that there's absolutely no reason for it, like, at all. Like, I keep myself busy. I go to work. I took my dog out today for like an hour and a half just to walk. I cleaned. I did all this stuff, but it's still there. What else? It's funny because the church, I feel like the church needs to address it, because Christians, we're gonna get dark. Christians commit suicide too. Okay? Christians deal with depression and anxiety too, and I feel like a lot of the times the church sees it as a deficit of faith, or basically just that, or like you're not doing something correct in your spiritual walk. And honestly, that is the most harmful thing that you can tell someone. Like I have a relative of mine, and she is, I look up to her. She's such a godly woman. She's my grandmother, and I love her dearly. But she's never dealt with it to the extent that I have. But like she'll tell me, like, you just need to find a Bible verse, and you need to just somehow quiet yourself in God. And it's sometimes you can't, like, you just can't do it. And I feel like a lot of people might feel condemnation because they feel like having depression or anxiety is a sin. And by the way, I listened to a pastor, or I read an article the other night by a pastor who I thought I liked. I really thought I liked him. I forgot his name, but he writes and does a thing called Desiring God. And he said that having anxiety is a sin. And I wanted to spit. Because he's never walked in my shoes, and he doesn't know how much this is crippling. And my only advice I can give, and like it's so hard sometimes because sometimes it's so crippling and I'm so anxious that I can't even pray. But I've learned something very interesting. Worship is my most successful weapon against it. I don't know why, but when I can take my focus off of it and start singing, even down here in the basement, like I'll come down here, my neighbors hear me, and I'll just start singing worship music at the top of my lungs, something in my soul settles. Something just settles down. And there's also something about when because sometimes it gets really bad, like my OCD attaches itself to my faith. OCD will take anything that means anything to you and just absolutely try to destroy it. And like people with OCD sometimes have a tendency, especially if they grew up in a religious atmosphere, to feel like they're possessed. And sometimes that's exactly what it feels like, because I was struggling with my faith in Christ so badly, and it was like obsessive doubt. It was obsessive doubt. Like 99% of my day was just me pacing back and forth, panicking over the fact that I might not believe this. And it got to a point where I was ready to just off myself, because I was just like, if I'm incapable of doing it, then what's the point of living? I'm going to the same place anyway. But it's funny, God speaks to me very literally through people, through YouTube, because he knows I'm on YouTube all the time, through articles, and it could, because he knows that I'm hard-headed, and you can't just give me like a little breath and I'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like he has to be very literal with me, and that's something that I really love about God, is that he knows me on that level. But every time he would send me something to remind me, almost word for word, that I still belonged to him, that I was still his child. And the obsessive doubting was getting so bad that I kept praying. I was like, God, was that really you? Was that really you that grabbed a hold of me? Because I'm doubting that too, and that gives me no hope. And I was watching a sermon, and the pastor very point blank was talking about, I forgot the name of the Bible characters. I was gonna think I'm such a terrible Christian. It's whatever. Samuel. I think it was Samuel, yeah. And the pastor just went, God is telling you right now that yes, that is my voice that you heard. I did call you out of the dark. And it's funny because I would pray it, but I would also write it in poetry. And when he addressed that, it was almost word for word what I was asking. So God speaks to me on a very literal level. But the thing that I struggle with most right now is it's so crippling and so debilitating that I'm often just like, how are you gonna, like, I'm basically just being like, God, heal me. Like, I can't live like this. I can't live like this. Like, the Valium doesn't work, nothing works. And he hasn't, and sometimes he's not going to, I guess. And I don't know how to become content in it. I wish that I could, but the more I keep my eyes on Jesus, I don't know how to explain it, the more warmth inside that I feel. Because Jesus is the author and the finisher. God is Alpha and Omega. And there's something about when you are just standing on the ledge. I don't know what it could be. It could be your depression. It could be your anxiety. It could be your hopelessness. It could be suicide. And just getting down on your face and crying mercy. Just have mercy. It's almost like screaming uncle when you're in a wrestling match with someone. Is the only way I can describe it. And it's not like have mercy because I'm doing something wrong, but God, just have mercy. And there are many times recently where he's heard that, because God likes to give mercy. He loves to give it out. But the only advice I can give is, and like I said, like some of you are going to get really irritated with me because I know how hard it is. But if you can just find a worship song or something that you like, something that makes you reset where your brain is and just go with that, it'll help you breathe. Because I notice when I keep my eyes on him, and a lot of the times through worship, that's the only way I can do that. Because I'm forcing myself to do it in the midst of my anxiety, because anxiety sometimes makes it so I don't even pray, because I'm just obsessing constantly. Find that and go after it, because God hears worship. And if you struggle with this kind of stuff, you're going to be really good at worship. You're going to be really good at it. I don't know if I really have any other thoughts. I mean, this video has gone on just forever and a day. I mean, I guess another topic is like, do you go to hell if you commit suicide? Which is, I don't, to be honest, I don't believe that. I also don't think that it's like a wise idea to be like, I'm so sick of this world, like, God, I just want to go to heaven, so I'm going to kill myself. That's not it at all. But I don't think that people do, because even Christians can get that far and that low where that happens to them. And when Jesus died on the cross, he didn't just die for like certain sins. Like, is killing yourself a sin? Absolutely. Because God is the only one who is supposed to be able to give and take. But also, Jesus didn't just die for specific ones. He died for every single one. So if you belong to him, you can still hit that low point because you're still human. But I don't believe that you go to hell for it. And I've had friends who have had family members go that way, and if there's anything that I wish that I could let them know, because I don't know if they ever worry about it, is that if they belong to God, they're in heaven. You can be a Christian and still reach that terrible low point. I'm a Christian. I'm at a low point right now. I really don't want to do anything right now except chain smoke, because I took my allotted Valium for today, like, but it's just, I don't know, it's somehow God's gonna use this. That's the only thing I can think. Even if I don't believe it, even if I doubt it, he'll use it somehow, some way. He might not never take it away, and I wish that he would, because sometimes it's absolutely debilitating, and it's hard to find people who understand. I don't know how I'm ever going to get married or anything to anyone with this, because I just feel like I'd be a constant burden. Like, I feel like it's going to swallow my life sometimes and my future, but I just got to remember that God already knows everything. He knows how I'm going to act tomorrow. He knows who I'm going to meet tomorrow. He knows everything. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows how this ends. He knows how this ends. And if I'm not dead yet, then God isn't finished with me. And that gives me some level of hope. But just so you know, you're not by yourself, especially if you grew up in a church that told you, I don't know if you grew up in a church like I did, you are not sinning because you have a mental illness. It is as real as a heart attack or a cold or anything like that. And we have strength in numbers. So just don't give up. I can't stress that enough, and I have to tell myself that every day. It's just don't give up. Don't give up. That's it. That's all I had to say.
All again, will it be the end? I know it's wrong, you think I'm strong, but I just pretend. Is it taking over? Will it bury me? Or will clarity become the cure for my disease?